I resonate completely with slow living, but it doesn't have to be that it's a very slow paced life. Is my life less busy now? No. Do I spend more time outside? Less time in front of my laptop? Do I buy less? Do I eat better food? All of those things are true now that I'm here. And so even though my day is as full, it is full with nurturing stuff. And that to me is slow living. Those kinds of needs and wants that I used to have just sort of gone, which I think makes living slowly easier.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Hey, Mom. It is lovely to see you, and I think it would be fun to let the listeners in on just some of our adventures and getting this intro recorded.
Yeah, really. Okay, so today, for whatever reason, my internet at the farmhouse is not working. So I just picked up everything and I came down the street here to the feed store. So here I am at the feed store and everybody's here buying their flowers and their horse feed and everything. So if you hear background noise, that's what's going on.
Yeah, so they have great internet.
Great internet. It's so awesome. It's really fun to have everything working. I love it. Yeah.
You know what's so funny about that? So this feed store that she's sitting in, y'all, is this really cool old general store
Yeah.
that's been there, what, 100 years?
It might have been built 100 years ago, but it was, it was run by a local family for like 40 years.
And then it was closed for a while.
Closed for a while and has just recently opened back up
Yeah.
a year or two ago. Yeah. And
So here we are.
isn't that something?
That's so fun. So coming at you from, well, half of us. Mary is coming from Seneca Feed Store, and I'm in Washington, D.C. And yay, we're so excited to introduce this episode. It's going to be so fun. I love this episode. I learned so much. But first, I also want to say, I want to compliment you, Mom, because I was over at the farm the other day. And your garden is just so gorgeous. I've been putting up some videos that you've taken on Instagram so we can share, people can see. If you're not following us, we are Lady Farmer. Mom can post some garden updates. It's so much more fun when there's like things in the garden to talk about.
Yeah.
But it's so beautiful. And what I really love is several years ago, I guess almost 10 now, when y'all moved in the garden, you had like seen a YouTube video of someone like laying down mulch and then cardboard and mulch. Was it like a layer like that or was it just mulch?
Yeah. The advice was to put something down first and then cover that with mulch. And I just took a pasture, what had been a horse pasture, and covered it with whatever cardboard I could come up, brown paper bags and all that kind of thing. And then had the tree company come and deliver for free. They'll do that. Just a whole bunch of mulch over it. And over the years, it has just created this really awesome, beautiful soil now.
It's like decomposed in this really soft,
Yeah.
spongy. Oh, it's so great. It feels so good to walk on. And now there's like sweet little like clovers and stuff growing on it. It's like a carpet.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I think it's about 7,500 square feet.
And there's these sweet little paths that y'all have mowed. And
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy, who also helps us type up the
Yeah.
show notes to this podcast. Shout out to Dorothy.
Dorothy.
She helps in the garden too. So it's a fun little lady farmer project. It looks so good.
I have 2 ponds, frogs and fish and birds
Yeah.
and that whole thing. A bigger one and a smaller one. And the trees I planted several years ago are now coming up and bearing fruit. And yeah, it's a good lesson in patience. I mean, it takes a while to develop these things. So 10 years now. Well, we bought the property 10 years ago. So it took a while to get going in the garden. So I would say this is my 10th season in the garden.
Yeah, so cool. Anyway, so that was my share and tell was about your garden. So there you go.
Okay.
So do you have a share and tell?
I do, and it is about the garden. Surprise,
Oh,
surprise.
fun.
So this year we have been trying to stick to planting by the signs of the moon. This is an old tradition. I knew about it when I was growing up in East Tennessee, which is southern Appalachia. A lot of the old timers around there were still doing it. And I heard about it, but of course, as a young person, I wasn't paying that much attention. And now that I'm older and have left that region, I realize there are really not that many people that know much about it anymore. It's kind of a dying art. It's kind of one of those areas of knowledge that is going out with the people that practiced it. But you can still get access to this information through the Farmer's Almanac, and there are some other resources, not too many. So, as a way of just enjoying the garden and enjoying growing things, and also a way of preserving my own legacy from Southern Appalachia, I've really been applying those principles to the garden this year. So, how it works is every month the moon passes through all the zodiac signs, and there's a light phase of the moon and a dark phase of the moon. And there are certain times within that to do certain things: planting, harvesting, weeding, all kinds of things. And we actually have a calendar in the almanac that is a guide to this. And I've been really using that calendar in the almanac. It has come in very handy. You just look on the day, and there are little icons there that tell you what is a good day for. I have noticed that when I plant things on the right day in the fertile signs, things just do very well. You can transplant things and they don't wilt as much. They just seem really happy to go where you're putting them. And could it be my imagination? Sure. But
Yeah.
I'm having fun doing it anyway.
It is so fun. And like whether or not there's anything to it, I would argue that there is something to it because, like anything else, it's really fun to have like an external form of organization for these
Yeah.
kinds of things, or then you're just overwhelmed. It just helps you make decisions about things. And I don't know, that's fun.
Well, it paces you like, oh, today is not a good day to plant those
Hmm.
things. We're going to wait. And so then it allows you to turn to all the other tasks. And yeah, it does kind of help with the overwhelm. It's like there's so much to do out there.
Yeah.
This helps you select what is it a good day for?
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do today in the garden according to the position of the moon? So, any of you that are really interested in this, I of course recommend the Farmer's Almanac, but also we have a calendar in our own almanac, the Lady Farmer Almanac. And Emma, tell people how to get there.
Oh, yeah. So you can go to ladyfarmer.com, click on community. If you follow us on Instagram, it's linked in our bio. But we do totally really rely on y'all's support in this way through the community to keep the show going. And so we'd love to see you in there, and we'd love to follow along your progress and hear how you're doing with your planting by the signs. Also in the works, we hope to have sometime in the future, I don't know how near future, we hope to have a whole course on planting by the moon because there's so much to it.
Yeah.
Mom, as you have found, there's not really one straightforward source. You've sort of cobbled together a lot of different stuff to learn what you've learned. So
Yeah.
stay tuned.
Yes, and one of the reasons I thought to share that today is because this week's episode is about flowers. Our guest today is Bex Partridge, and she's coming to us all the way from Devon, England. And she is a plantswoman extraordinaire and a floral artist who specializes in dried flowers. And this is a niche which she's developed into a full-time business. She does installations, teaching tutorials, workshops. She creates floral art, and she's also a mom. She's the author of 2 books, Everlastings and Flowers Forever. And that one is to be released this month.
Yeah, and if you aren't already following her on Instagram, she is quite the inspiring follow. I really think that's how I first found her. Photography and her art is just so enchanting, and what she does with dried flowers is so beautiful, and it's just the whole idea behind it is beautiful. We really enjoyed this meaningful discussion. We're so lucky to have lots of those on the Good Dirt. And it was really about so much more than flowers. Bex talks about finding her way from the corporate life into a new home and community where she has been able to explore her passion for being in the garden working with plants, and creating art from the things she grows. We talk a lot about the long process of trying to balance making a living and doing what you love, about creating sustainability in life and business, and what it's like when your own creative desires don't meet the expectations of others. Vex is so warm, wise, and a whole lot of fun to talk to. We know you'll enjoy this. Also, fun fact about this, Mom, I don't even know if I told you this, but our editor, Alexandra, shout out Alexandra, after she edited this conversation, she emails me the finished file and she was like, I love this conversation, Emma. Bex was so inspiring. And then she sent me this picture of this crazy flower that she had seen on her walk that reminded her of this. So that was really fun.
It really is inspiring. I just really enjoyed this so much. And so here she is, Bex Partridge of Botanical Tales.
It's been a very long, winding journey to get to where I am. And now that I'm here, actually, there were threads taking me in this direction all the time, but it's been very convoluted. And I guess first, I should probably say that I have always, for as long as I can remember, been in love with gardening. And whilst my business is kind of primarily built around dried flowers, the center of it, the heart of it is growing. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for that part of the journey and the process, that goes into kind of the things that I make. But yeah, I had a grandma and my mum who's still around, both of whom are really avid, passionate gardeners. And that was instilled in me, or maybe encouraged in me, from a very young age. I remember being in my 20s, married to my husband, owned our first house where we lived in Farnham, which was just outside London, and all of our friends out clubbing at the weekend, and I just wanted to be at home growing sweet peas and extending the garden a little bit. This was just living in a town, so we didn't have a huge amount of space, but I just loved it. So that has always been with me. But I left school at 16, which is quite unusual in my family. My dad's a lawyer, my mum's a teacher, my brothers both trained to be lawyers. My half brother and sister did the whole university thing. So I was the real odd one out in the family. And I've always been like that, just carved my own path, whether it was, the easy route or the hard route. I just kind of knew what I wanted. And I think the thing I struggled with at an early age was committing to studying something that I didn't really know if I wanted or was that passionate about, because, I'm 42 in a few weeks' time. And so you're talking 25 years ago, the way people spoke to you about what was possible in your career was vastly different to what it is now. There was nothing really inspiring. Yeah, so I just didn't want to do that. So I trained to be a chef when I was 17, 18. So I did a year of cookery school and I absolutely loved it, but I really didn't like the hours. I found it very hard to be working weekends when all my friends and my boyfriend were out all the time. So I swiftly moved into wedding planning, which is obviously not too far from what I do now. So the lady that I worked for in this catering company, who I worked for as a chef and then as a wedding planner, was really into seasonal cooking and growing and used herbs and edible flowers in her food, which was quite forward thinking back then. And I obviously didn't realize it at the time, but hugely influential in what I was doing and helping me understand a bit more about seasonal eating and, working with what you've got around you rather than bringing things in all the time. And then I met my partner, who's now my husband, and or got together with him, been friends most of our lives, and decided to go traveling for a couple of years. So we did that, which was an amazing adventure. And when I came back, I got a job with an organic food company as a PA. And then slowly I started slipping into marketing, basically. So I started a career in that. And then I slipped into the corporate world, which was, oh,
Oh my goodness.
I just, looking back, it was all about kind of external validation. I work for a big
Yeah.
organization. I don't know if you know of Unilever in America, but it's a huge FMCG. And, I thought this is what life was, because I was getting so much congratulations, but I was deeply unhappy basically for 10 years of my life. And that sounds really sad, but
And you were probably getting a good paycheck too.
I did, but I got really into kind of understanding the ties that being in full-time employment, there's obviously huge benefits. And for some people that is the right way of life. But actually for me, I really struggled with the control that companies have over your day when you're employed, and I realized more and more, particularly after I had my children, actually, that I was spending most of my life doing things I didn't want to do with people I didn't particularly like. And being inside, and this office we worked in had floor to ceiling windows with beautiful countryside outside, but I felt like a caged animal. I was just, just looking out the window all the time, but having to do work. And so within that job, I did do some really good stuff. And I purposely kind of carved a career for myself there where I was working on brands that were doing good for the world and the environment and all that kind of stuff. So I was really kind of pushing that agenda and doing well. But after the birth of my second son, and we'd come back from 2 years in Amsterdam. We went there with my job and it was brilliant. And that kind of really changed both me and my husband's life values, I would say, being in Amsterdam. I don't know if you've ever been, or if you know anything about the kind of culture, but it's very egalitarian. So everyone's equal regardless of what you do. Of course, there's class systems and all that kind of stuff, but a barista is as celebrated as a manager.
Mhm.
And a bar person is as much respect for his job, and everyone else respects his job as much as anyone else. And that was really eye-opening for me because my family structure and the way I've been brought up is very hierarchical, and it's all about career progression. And yeah, it kind of made me and my husband actually take a step back and reassess, not really consciously, but just really kind of helped us think about how we wanted to live our lives. And came back to the UK. I had another baby, my second son. We moved house and moved into this garden in Farnham where we've lived all of our lives. And it was in the town centre, this house, but the garden basically was, the house was built on a little section of an old garden. So what was growing there, and it was all kind of coincidental with my son being born in March and then the garden sort of coming to life and me being on maternity leave. And I was suddenly just really wakened up to the natural world in some way. I don't know. It was serendipitous. I don't know whether it was just the right time. But I started to kind of document that through Instagram, which is how Botanical Tales started. I really thought that all that was going to be was just an Instagram account with some photos of me sharing the flowers that I loved and the stories behind them.
And at this point, it was just maternity leave, right? So you hadn't,
Yeah.
or had you left your job?
No, 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 no. Gosh, no. So
Oh,
I was
okay.
in a situation where, and again, this comes back to what we were talking about when you're in full-time employment. I had a
Mhm.
wonderful, wonderful situation, which was I got basically a year's full pay for being on maternity leave, which is
Oh
unheard
my
of in
gosh.
the UK. But you had to go back and work for a year afterwards, or you had to pay all your money back. So you're then in a locked-in situation.
Mm.
And I knew I would only want to go back part time. So I didn't spend all my money because I was going to have to repay some of it. But even that going back part time was really, by the time it came to it, was feeling really, really difficult. But obviously, I had to do it for money reasons and for contract reasons. But in that time on mat leave, I had been given a bunch of flowers before we left our old house by a friend. And it was just a bunch of flowers from the local supermarket, but it contained lots of flowers that kind of dried quite naturally. So I think definitely not native English, but it was sort of flowers from South Africa, protea, and all of that kind of stuff that actually dries really well. And I just happened to leave it because it was a really busy time in a vase and it dried. And I just put together a little wreath one day and I took that with me to the new house. And then somewhere along my journey in Botanical Tales, I shared that on Instagram. And suddenly from there, I think because I have always loved flowers and my grandma has always had dried flowers. And so it's always been a big part of my life to bring, foliage and all this kind of stuff into the house. But for the first time, it was like I'd finally found people that got it because,
Mhm.
you're talking, how old's my son now? He's 6 now. So this was 5, yeah, it was 6 years ago. And Instagram was a totally different place. It was much more community based there where you'd go on and you'd know everyone that you interacted with. And yeah, I just built up this kind
Mhm.
of audience who loved what I did. And it gave me a lot of confidence to just keep going really and practicing. And within that year, I then started to grow flowers to dry. So we had an allotment space that we'd owned for about 15 years, and my husband agreed to let me turn some of it over to drying flowers, growing and drying flowers. So that's like the first time I'd properly kind of gone out intentionally to sow seeds, to grow, to make something with, or even just cut, before it was very kind of haphazard. And then it kind of went from there. And it got to the point where my external life, in comparison to the one that I had in London where I worked, so I was commuting up to London every day, leaving the boys at home with my husband or going to nursery, but then also having this side project, which was getting bigger and bigger, that I just couldn't marry the two together anymore. It was too painful to go to work and
Mhm.
in that job. And it was getting really difficult at home. I was really, really unhappy. And my husband just sat me down September 3.5 years ago and was like, you have to resign. We will make it work, but this is not working and the money's not worth it, basically. And I'd obviously been saving, as much as I could in all of that time to kind of give me a bit of a buffer. Yeah, and so he forced me to hand in my resignation, and I did. And I didn't really know what was going to happen with Botanical Tales, but I just felt I'm very gut led, and I just felt like something would come of it. But I did for the next 2 years do part-time freelance contracting, marketing, and project management work to basically just help me figure out what I wanted to do and give me the security to not worry if I didn't get a month of work, or to say no to a client that didn't feel right because they were asking for bleached flowers or something, instead of thinking I had to take everything just to kind of make money. But for the last 18 months, it's just been solely the business as it is now, which is just me in my studio in Devon growing and drying flowers. So yeah, it's a long journey. I'm quite old now, but it's I feel very happy where I am.
Oh, no, that's so lovely, and I so appreciate you going into all the windiness
Yes.
because it always is like that, and that part is hard to say in an Instagram caption or,
Yeah.
so that's really fun. And just to clarify for maybe the listener who doesn't know,
Mm,
currently, you're a floral designer. Do you
mm.
work mostly with dried flowers? What's your kind of main
Yeah.
right now, what are you doing?
Yeah, I would say it is 99% dried flowers. And that's not to say I dislike fresh, because I love them. And it's not to say I won't go into that in the future. If I grow oodles of flowers that I can't dry, then potentially, that could be a possibility as well. So it's not a rigid, this is all I do, but it's definitely where my passion is. It's where I feel most happy and comfortable. And for me, a lot of it is to do with the fact that they last, which sounds like a silly thing to say, but I love to see a flower growing on a plant and staying on that plant until it has been, pollinated by a bee and then goes on to be a seed head. That for me is perfection. And I really struggle with cutting flowers, even for my own business, because the only way I can kind of make peace with it is the fact that I then get to go on and dry them. And yeah, I just find the fleetingness of fresh flowers, I find it a bit sad. Like, of course, I
Mm,
appreciate their beauty, but
yeah.
you know, especially for big, big events like weddings, I could never do that with fresh, because it feels really wasteful to me. And I'm not saying that anyone who uses fresh flowers or has fresh flowers is being wasteful, but this is just my
Right.
own, because I can understand them. And I had fresh flowers at my wedding, although if I was to get married now, I definitely would go all out dried. But yeah, and I run workshops. I educate a lot, so on how to grow and how to dry, but then also how to create the things, that you want to afterwards. And I make products for people's homes, so wreaths, pressed flower art, things like that. And then I do lots of installations for shop windows or retail spaces or restaurants, people who are looking to kind of bring the outside in and have a design that's going to last a bit longer than just a couple of weeks or something.
Oh, so fun. And is it just you or do you have a team?
No, it's just me.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you grow flowers on your own property there, or do you have other places where you grow them? And
So we've only moved here 18 months ago to Devon, and
uh-huh.
we have half an acre. So it's more than I've ever had garden wise, and something that I've always kind of secretly wished and wanted for, but I've always been quite conscious of not sort of being ungrateful for what I do have, if you know what I mean. So it's
Yeah.
been like a dream in my head, but not one that I kind of said out loud. But anyway, with lockdown, I think like many people, we just kind of reassessed where we were in our lives, and being the age we are with boys who are now 9 and 6, we kind of thought we need something more. And it wasn't intentional that I needed more land necessarily for my business, but it was more that we just wanted more
Mhm.
space. And by space I just mean a less busy environment. So where we were before in Farnham was a commuter town to London, so super busy, lots of cars, lots of people, very kind of built around consumerism. So in a town with shops and restaurants and, all that kind of stuff. And if you wanted to access the countryside, you had to drive to get there. And then, it was quite formulaic. And so, yeah, we decided to move to Devon, which is where we are now. And so I've got half an acre, and it's a very wild plot with lots of kind of established shrubs and things like that I can forage from. And then I have a growing space, which I'd say is probably maybe about a fifth of the half acre, which is where I grow sort of all my annuals and, things like that I specifically grow to dry. And then I have various kind of little sections of flower beds that are mainly perennials, which I would use for seed heads, later on in the season and stuff like that, but for all year round interest. And then in November, because I'm bonkers, I took on a whole allotment plot at the village down the road, which is about I think it's 3 or 4 miles down the road. I mean, I couldn't give up the opportunity when I was offered it, but my husband does think I'm mad. But I don't know if you have allotments over in America, but it's a real, like, once you've had one, you really miss it when you don't have it. So yeah, I grew on that as well.
Is that like a vacant lot that you get to use or lease or something?
Yeah, you sign a lease and it's kind of like ongoing until you don't want it anymore. But it's a really cheap way of borrowing land, basically. So I think I pay £25 a year for this whole allotment plot, which is huge. But the great thing about it is, particularly because I work on my own, you're obviously working and growing alongside other people who have their own plots.
Mhm.
So, if I'm feeling like I'm just stuck on the hill with no one to talk to but my husband, I can just pop to the allotment and I know that there'll be, oodles of people there that will want to talk to me about what I'm growing or how the season's going. And so, yeah, that's really good. So, but it's very different here where I am now. I've always grown in a town centre in a very sheltered garden, the equivalent of kind of a walled garden because you've got fences and, all the other gardens around you. And I'm now basically at the top of a hill, which has very, very extreme weathers. And I'm learning very quickly where I can plant and where I can't and what grows and what doesn't.
Mhm. I think the idea of a walled garden is particularly British. I don't think we have that so much here. Maybe in some really dense cities.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's a very British thing, but they're wonderful because they're so
Yeah,
sheltered.
so private.
So yeah, exactly. So, but here I'm just exposed to the elements and lots of my plants grew diagonally last year because I forgot about the prevailing winds and then they were just like
Aw.
Well, so you've only had really one season there. I mean, you're going into your second growing season, right? Is that right?
yeah, second growing season. And to be honest as well, I feel like that first, because we moved here in the pandemic, so we still had the first 6 to 8 months was in lockdown pretty
Mhm.
much. So, and I was homeschooling the boys, and it was a really stressful time because here that was coming up to a year of
Yeah.
broken life in some way. And we'd obviously had the stress of moving, and I had some big work jobs that I was working on as well. And I'm here now in the kind of middle of the second spring, and I'm seeing things that I definitely didn't see last year because I think it was a very insular year and quite
Yeah.
intense in your headspace. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm noticing things now where I'm like, I don't remember that last year, like the blossom tree outside our annex. I was like, I don't even remember that flowering last year, but of course it did because we had cherries. So
Mm.
yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Mm.
So, what do you have do you have a lot of native things native to where you are, or had someone cultivated the land before you and put other things in? Like, what have you got there? I'm just interested.
So I wish I did know more about the history of this particular plot of land. What we know is the couple that built the house that we live in inherited it from his mum,
Mhm.
who had a bungalow, which they then turned into our house. And I know that they weren't gardeners because they told me that they weren't, but they took care of things. There are lots of really beautiful shrubs here, like camellias, which grow really well on our soil. So we've got clay soil. So I've got 7 or 8 different varieties of amazing camellias, which flower from February right the way through to June. A beautiful magnolia tree, there's a cherry tree, a plum tree, which are all really established. And there's a
Mm.
ginkgo tree, a specimen ginkgo tree, which is taller
Oh.
than our house, which apparently his mum put in. So I feel like she was a plants lady. And all of those old things that are in here are thanks to her. And, thankfully they left them and kind of they're still thriving. But my studio where I work, the people that we bought the house from just had it as a potting shed. So they had their lawnmower and, shears and all that kind of stuff. And we had to apply for planning permission to get something changed in the garden. And we saw a planning notice from 1950 something or other for the lady that lived here before who used to run this studio as her pottery studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's got that's what I mean. I wish I knew more about the land and the lady that lived here before the couple that we bought from, because
She
she
was an
sounds so,
artist.
yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting, and I always feel like in my studio, it's not a potting shed. It's such a beautiful space. It's got a real kind of feeling to it, more than just like wooden walls and a couple of windows. So yeah.
So tell us more about Botanical Tales. Do you do weddings, or what else do you do? And how do you dry your flowers, and what's your process? And
Yeah.
talk to us all about Botanical Tales.
So I don't do that many weddings. I love to do the bridal party florals. So whether that's the bouquet or a flower crown or something like that. So I don't know what it's like in America, but in the UK, dried flowers is definitely becoming more popular, but it's still quite a minute amount of people who would really fully appreciate and love dried flowers to the extent that they'd have only dried flowers at their wedding. And I do get inquiries, but I tend to just do bridal florals unless someone who I know is kind of gets my way of working and the things that I do is fully on board. So it's less weddings and it's more installations and work for people's homes and things like that. Because of that, and because of the fact that I work with dried flowers, my year is a bit different to a normal kind of person who's working with flowers, right? Because normally, whether you're a florist or you're a flower grower, your really busy points in the year are the summer when everything's in bloom. Whereas for me, and this actually fits really nicely with my lifestyle as well, which is that I've got 2 small kids and they get 6 weeks off in the summer, and I can't be a flower farmer of fresh flowers because I'd
Yeah.
never see them in the summer months. Maybe when they're a bit older, I could do that. Because instead, what it is my busy time is basically September all the way through to probably January, February, when fresh flowers are less available and people are slowly sort of turning more into that indoors environment, because that's where dried flowers are kind of best placed, really. But that's not to say the rest of the year isn't busy. I do lots of other things, and obviously I'm growing that whole time as well. So from January all the way through.
Do you harvest at a certain time in order to dry them a certain way?
Yeah, so the majority of things that I dry are in the summer. I am experimenting more and more with spring blooms, for example. So tulips and ranunculus and all of those kind of fleshy flowers, but they're much harder to dry and much harder to get to dry to the point where you can work with them and get longevity out of them, without deteriorating quite quickly. So yeah, my drying season probably starts properly from about June time, and then it will go all the way through really until December, when you can still pluck a seed head from the flower bed or from the hedgerow or something like that and use it there and then. And I guess the top tips that I can give someone who potentially wanted to dry is, first of all, there are no real set rules about what does and doesn't dry. I think there is a level of acceptability of dried flowers depending on where you are along your journey, because I will accept anything dried, but some
Yeah.
people may think that some things are a bit gross if they're dried. So a dahlia, for example, is going to go from being a big blousy bloom when it's fresh to quite a small crinkled little flower when it's dried, with like tissue paper thin petals. And I think they're absolutely stunning, but they are nothing in comparison to what their fresh self is, versus something like a straw flower, which they don't really change much at all in their structure.
Mhm.
But the main thing that you want to do when you're drying flowers is remember that it's a bit different to when you're cutting flowers fresh. So if you were a flower farmer, or, in your garden, and you wanted to cut flowers for a vase or a display, you would cut them just before they open so that they can go on and open in the house, and you get, longer to enjoy them basically. If you cut them on the day they're looking beautiful, then you're going to get 1 or 2 days before they kind of disintegrate or fade. And the difference with dried flowers is you actually want to pick them when they're open and at their best for the most part. You don't want to cut them in bud, because that means they will dry in bud, and often that means that they're too fleshy and they might go a bit moldy or something. So you're looking for a really kind of beautiful open flower, but not one that's gone too far over, because then you may get petals that fall off and things like that. And I love that about growing flowers to dry, is that I can also enjoy them in the garden, and I can watch
Yeah.
them, pollinate them for a bit before I go and cut them. And it's lots of the kind of the photos and videos that I'm able to take of my garden, I wouldn't be able to do if I was cutting for fresh, because they'd never be in bloom,
Mhm.
in that stage of bloom kind of thing. So I love the visual aesthetic as well, and I love the fact that they're left there for the bees and butterflies to have a bit before I then cut them. And then the best thing to do is strip all of the leaves, or as many of the leaves off as you can, from the stalk once you have cut the flower that you want to dry. If you do want to leave a few leaves on kind of around the top as a bit of interest, that's quite nice and can make them look a bit more organic than just the flower head on its own. This isn't necessary, but now that I'm growing on a kind of bigger scale, I tend to cut my stems, wrap an elastic band around the amount that I'm going to dry in a bunch. So that can be between kind of 5 and 10 stems, depending on how big the flower is. And I leave them in a bucket overnight in a cool place, just to have a really good drink. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive because you're then going on to dry them. But what that means is you're not drying them in a stressed state. You're giving them the best chance, basically. And then I would say for probably 95% of things that I dry, I just hang them upside down in bunches. And the key things are that you make sure that you have a space which is damp free. So, no moisture, somewhere that's kind of got an ambient room temperature. So you don't want it too cold, but you also don't want it too hot. If it's too cold, they can get moldy just because they're not drying quick enough. If it's too hot, you'll find that the stems just dry really quickly and can become quite brittle, which makes them really hard to work with. And then you want to make sure it doesn't have to be a dark room. There are benefits to drying things in the dark, but they just need to not be in direct sunlight. That's the main thing. So I dry a lot of my things on the back wall here. And because of the trees overhead and the windows being there and it being quite low ceilinged cabin, the sun never hits them.
And then once it is dry to the place that you want it, do you treat it with anything or like
No.
spray anything? Okay.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
don't use any chemicals. I don't use anything. So I grow naturally and organically. And then when it comes to my work as well, I don't wire anything. Sometimes for the mechanics of, if I'm building a big installation, I might have to use chicken wire, but I always make it so that the stems can be removed and reused if possible, or removed and then composted. But with the spraying, so something like a pampas grass, or maybe, I don't know if you have wild clematis over where you are, but we call it old man's beard. You've probably seen it. It's
Mhm.
something that comes out in autumn here and it's in the hedgerows and people use it in loads of different kind of displays and things. But these are basically fluffy seed heads that just go everywhere after a period of time. So some people choose to spray those things with hairspray and that kind of sets them and keeps them in place. But yeah, I just try not to use anything like that. And you can dye things naturally using kind of soya-based dyes or natural vegetable dyes and, drawing the dye up the stem of the flower. But even though that's all natural, I still think, why change something that nature's kind of made the way it is?
And it's really amazing how already perfectly beautiful it is.
I completely agree, obviously.
I love that. And it sounds like it's either very low waste or zero waste, or it's everything biodegradable.
Yeah. So I did a big 40, basically number 40, for someone whose party it was in the local area a couple of weeks ago. So I made this beautiful kind of, instead of a helium balloon or something, she had these 40s on
Yeah.
the stage. And it was
Oh.
lovely. But I've just spent today taking those apart and I've got all of these flowers now, which I will go on and use somewhere else because,
Oh.
yeah, I mean, her house isn't big enough to have a massive 40 in it. And also she's like, it was great for the party, but so, and that's
Oh.
something that I offer because, why would you not reuse them if you can? Of course, they're shorter stems, they're a bit harder to work with, and I'll be limited with what I can do with them, but I can definitely make something out of them. And anything else gets composted, puts into our compost in the garden, and eventually will go back into the soil to
Yeah.
reinvigorate the soil. So it's very much as possible, kind of low waste as I can be, really. It's funny, I used to feel really like I was a bit of a cheapskate, but
Oh,
then I was,
no.
No.
well, yeah, when I first started out, I was thinking, gosh, should I be offering this? But now I'm like, no, I will, because otherwise it's just going to be thrown away.
Well, it's true that when you have a big, beautiful flower install, I mean, a huge part of it, part of your service as a service provider would be to take it away when people are done. So, literally, like, that's a line item you can charge for.
Mm,
Like, I'll also take care of the end of life of this thing. So, yeah, why wouldn't
yeah.
you? If you're going to take it down for them, which is also a service, yeah, reuse your stuff. That
No.
makes so much sense.
That's
Yeah, I know. I think it's a confidence thing. As I'm more assured of who I am and who my business is, I'm like, of course, I'll do
Yeah.
this. And then you're like, everyone's like, of course, why would you not do that?
Yes, we can relate.
oh, it serves the good dirt in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the whole ethos behind what you're doing, and things in their natural state and low waste and all compostable. It's just also we're just very simpatico with it.
I'm really interested in general, just the wedding industry as a whole.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear about the UK versus America, and
Yeah.
then also obviously the past 2 years and what that's done to the wedding industry. And like, you worked as a wedding planner, and just sort of
Mm.
what your journey has been like and how your perspective on this has been shaped by your experience in the wedding industry and what you see and like how you feel about it.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's not even the wedding industry, is it? It's just
Consumerism.
floristry as a whole. Like, I
Okay.
mean, because I can't comment on how much money people spend on weddings and stuff, because I've been there and I did that. And of course, in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I hadn't done that, because I know the value of it is,
Yeah.
but that's hindsight is a wonderful thing. But I think what still continues to surprise me is how many people work in the flower industry but don't understand seasonality or the way things grow. And it's a bit like being a chef and not understanding where your food comes from.
Mm.
And I think there's the pandemic, and now, everything that's going on basically with finite resources, right, in the world at the
Yeah.
moment, where it's made people, florists as well, over with COVID and the pandemic in the UK, where they couldn't get, well, first of all, there weren't many weddings because
Yeah.
everything had been called off. Just
Yeah.
so it forced florists to kind of pivot their businesses for many of them and look at different ways to make money. And that might be that they decided to do a bouquet service or something like that. But then when they went down that route and realized they couldn't get the flowers that they would normally get, we're still in a bit of a drought, when it comes to flowers.
Mm-hmm.
It just made them question a lot of things. And so the flower industry in the UK is going great guns. And that's despite it being 2 really, really challenging years weather-wise, which makes growing very, very difficult. So really, really dry springs, and then very late frosts, and then very early frosts, but lots of fluctuating temperatures and stuff. But still, it's doing really, really well with lots of kind of small micro growers starting up, which I think is fantastic.
Mm.
And I think people generally are becoming more aware of where things come from. So we've been on this journey with food in the UK, where there's a real kind of understanding now of buying locally, buying organically, as much as possible, eating seasonally. And that's not to say the supermarkets still don't sell everything out of season, but there is definitely a deeper understanding than there was, when I was growing up, when I remember the first avocado I ever ate and the first pineapple, and all of this cool, exciting global stuff. And now everyone's just gone, actually, we should just be eating from that farm down the road who,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, it might be our 50th broccoli of the month, but that's, that's okay.
Yeah.
When the asparagus comes, it will be amazing for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And flowers are the same. And so there's this whole slow flower movement that's happening in the UK, which is local flowers, understanding the beauty is in the imperfection, but also the wonderful things you get with that, which is scent. Like, all of the flowers that you buy on these mass marketplaces, most of them don't smell of anything. They're rigid.
That's such a good point.
They don't have a personality. They're just
Mhm.
all uniform and all the same. I feel like there's a real kind of awakening amongst florists and flower growers, and also people, about actually, yeah, the benefits of these nicer, kind of more local flowers that are growing everywhere, really. But there's still a really long way to go. And I think it does really, really worry me. It's the same if you were to train to be a gardener or something like that. I still don't think there's enough focus on sustainability, on how do you make a garden that not only looks good, but also can withstand climate change.
Mhm.
What are we doing to make sure that we're growing those plants that can withstand these change in seasons that we're seeing, the lack of rain, the really dry spells? And it's the same when you're a florist. If you're training to be a florist, a huge part of that should be the origins of the flower, how a flower grows,
Mhm.
the impact of that industry on the environment, because for something that's inherently nature based, it is so damaging to the environment. The way
Wow.
things are grown in glass houses and flown across the world and kept refrigerated and modified to make them last for longer. For me, it's a scary place to be when you stop seeing a flower as a natural thing and more as a product. And I think that's where we got to for a while, where it was just another thing that you bought rather than a thing that has been grown and taken resource out of the earth to get there.
Like a commodity.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So interesting because here on this show, we talk so much about all the systems that aren't working and are kind of broken because of exactly what you just
Mm,
explained. Like we've forgotten where they come from. We've forgotten the impact on the earth and the soil. And we've forgotten
mm,
even health wise, some of the chemicals that are sprayed on
mm.
those things. I think I read an article where some of the preservatives that are sprayed on the flowers that you might like just pick up at the supermarket, just like your $10 bouquet or whatever, has some sort of god awful stuff sprayed on it.
I can believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so instead of this, like you said, this natural thing like flowers, here we go. Here we go with another system that's been commodified. I guess it's a word.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's just industrialized, isn't it? And it's
Yeah, it is.
made,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's okay, how can we grow that thing faster and better? Better in,
Mhm.
because it's not really better, but I think it's like it's generational. So when we moved here to Devon, there's a sort of horticultural society which I'm part of, and the ladies all kind of down in the lane and where I live club together to bring me some flowers round. And I now know that they all have the most amazing gardens, like unbelievable, because they're part of the horticultural society, they're gardeners. But they went to the supermarket and bought me flowers from the supermarket to give me.
Mm.
And I was like, I would, I mean, you didn't even need to spend any money, but it's not even about the money. Like, I would have
I
loved if it came from
understand.
your garden.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That's so funny.
Isn't that funny? But that's like the generation above me, even.
Yeah.
So
Oh, like
it's,
it had more value because it was from the store.
yeah, whereas if they had cut it or bought me a cutting or a plant from their garden, that for me would have had more meaning behind it. But it really, there's no sort of judgment here from me when I'm telling the
Of
story, but
course.
it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, even somebody who is part of a horticultural society and has an amazing garden and growing didn't sort of make the connection that you can just go and cut flowers from your garden. You don't have to go and buy. And
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
not from supermarkets.
That reminds me of when I was growing up, there was a saying, and this even predates me a little bit, that store-bought bread was special.
Yeah. It was so good. Store bought.
It was store-bought meant it was the
Really?
best. Yeah. So meaning that, the bread you baked at home was just sort of normal and blasé. But if you got it from the store, that was something really special. And what you're describing is what you're doing in the floral industry is like redirecting people's appreciation for just the natural state of things. We talk about this with
Mm,
food, we talk about it with
yeah.
clothing, we talk about it with implements that we use every day, things, we cook with and handle, and things we put on
Mm,
our skin, all the products, the
yeah.
closer we get to nature and the thing's natural state, and the more we know the source of them, the better
Mm,
off we are. This is kind of hopefully the way things are going, because the other way was taking us into a really bad direction with the environment and our health and human exploitation and all those things.
yeah, as awful as these times are, because they are, they're scary and they're unsettling.
Yeah.
But this whole thing that's happening at the moment, particularly in Europe with the war that's going on, it's really hammering home how broken the system is.
Yeah.
Whether that be because we no longer want to buy oil from Russia, or whether it's because farmers now can't use the amount of fertilizer that they want to use on their fields to grow their crops faster, because most of that phosphate comes from Ukraine and Ukraine is in war. And you're suddenly like, but why do we need to grow all these vegetables with all of this fertilizer? Why are we so reliant on all of these things being available from all around the world, when actually there's a benefit to local growing and local buying and kind of local ways of doing things? And my husband works for WWF, the charity, and it's times like this when things fundamentally change, and that's my hope, is that we're on that journey now where
Yes.
where the system is so broken that things are going to have to change. That's my hope anyway. I have to have hope for my boys, really.
Yeah. And have you seen that really since the war really started? Have you seen a real shift in people's perceptions?
So I think it has definitely in the UK. There's a couple of things that have happened, which is I think the outpouring and willingness of British people to welcome refugees when the government is not really doing very much has been amazing for everyone to see, after everything that's gone on with Brexit, with all that horrible stuff. Like, actually, people are kind, and the same thing happened in the pandemic, actually. So there's that side of it, but there's what is going to hit over the next couple of months, probably a year, is the cost of living increase. And
Hmm.
when that hits home with the energy rises, which are, it's not just the war which has caused this, there's fundamental issues, in the UK and Europe generally with stuff like this. But all of these kinds of things are going to, I think, force people to just take a step back and think, how can I do things slightly differently? Whether that is, I'm just going to wear a jumper instead of putting my heating on. I don't know what it is. Like, we've made some differences to our lives already. And I think, yeah, I'm hoping that other people will as well. So,
Yeah. I know. I think in the States, we're just a little more far removed from it.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, our gas prices have
Hmm.
been steadily rising. So I think that's one of the main things that we're noticing. But it's just, we're not having to deal with it as immediately in the same way
yeah,
that you guys are. We can kind of turn it off if we want to, which is
yeah.
not unfortunate.
Something that sort of came up for us in the last few weeks is we decided, after sort of thinking about it all these years, we're going to look into the geothermal, which I think
Oh, yeah.
you called it something else on your property.
Subterranean.
Subterranean. It's the same thing, right?
So we have an air source heat pump, which is it's like a reverse air conditioning unit. So,
Uh-huh.
but that's what, yeah, that is what the government is trying to get most houses here to have instead of a boiler and a central heating system.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the geothermal is ground source heating, isn't it?
Yeah. Do the pipes way down and bring the.
So that again is meant to be amazing. And
Yeah. Well, we thought, okay, we're going to look into it finally because, last time we filled up a tank, it was like, oh my gosh, how
yeah,
unsustainable is this? And at the same
I know.
time, our neighbor just down the way said they were thinking about geothermal too.
But this is my point. This is when
Yeah.
it's a tipping point, right?
Yes. Yes.
Where
Yes.
Mhm.
we all know that we need to be doing this. We all
Yes.
know that we need to be doing that. But until it gets to the point where
It
it's triggered to
hurts.
the point where actually it doesn't make sense to not do this anymore, because
Exactly.
Yeah.
like people are inherently lazy, and that's not like a criticism, but
Mhm.
we're comfortable, we're easy, life's been good. And then suddenly, actually, I'm thinking about in my cabin, we live on a windy hill. Why don't I get one of those mini wind turbines and a little battery pack? And I could have electricity here for free. So it's stuff like that where I wouldn't have even thought of doing that until now. And we've gone, actually, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. The way
Yeah.
things evolve and, like you say, the tipping point.
Yeah, like what if people were charged for poundage of trash that was picked up?
Yeah.
Like what if you had to pay
Yeah. Yeah.
for throwing away plastic?
Or what if companies were, fined if their packaging can't be recycled or composted or
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah, they had to pay a tax to pay
Yeah.
for the processing. Yeah.
But I think that's all, that kind of stuff is, I think there's a power in people and making things happen at a lower level. Having worked for a big corporation like Unilever, where it's FMCG, it's such a slow beast, and
Mhm.
small differences. I think the differences that you can make as a person should never, like, it's easy to feel kind of disheartened, but actually if we all just do one tiny thing to make a difference, that's collective power. And yeah, that's the kind of way Ed and I always look at things, is what can we do to improve, just iterations every time, like what is it, just to get that bit better and to just consume less and use less,
Yeah.
because it helps us stay hopeful.
Do you feel like in your community, and I know you're relatively new to this community, but generally in your life, have you felt like you think about these things a little differently than the people around you? Or
Mhm.
especially with the dried flower things, like
Yeah.
have you felt a little bit like the weirdo who likes dried flowers and like,
I've always been a weirdo.
okay.
My son did a Mother's Day card, which was a flower where it said "My mama is," and then under each petal was like something about me. And so there were all these ones like "My mama is in love with flowers" and blah blah. And then the last one was "My mama is sometimes weird," and I was like, "Yes, yes, I'm proud of doing
Sometimes
this."
weird.
So I touched upon earlier, when we lived in the Netherlands, we spent 2 years in Amsterdam, which I think I said you really kind of changed the way we viewed life, and not only from a sort of family and sort of perspective, but also we lived in the middle of Amsterdam, and they celebrate small businesses. They celebrate creativity. They're all about community. Like, people will bring their sofas out in the middle of a city and sit on a sidewalk and have some beers and,
Hmm.
just like chat to people walking past. And that was totally different to being British, where you close your doors, you close your windows, you lock yourself away. And yeah, and we were like, God, wow, this is lovely. This is so open and nice. And then we came back to Farnham and we felt so out of place. You know, people would say how lovely and wonderful what I was doing was, but never buy anything from me or never support me or
Mhm.
never invest in me or never lift me up in that way, but always said really nice stuff. And anyway, so then we moved to Devon, and I can't tell you, I've had more business here in the 18 months I've been here than I ever have with anyone that I used to
Wow.
live near. Like, I have been welcomed with open arms, even though people didn't really understand what I did in
Yeah.
the first place. But they just took a punt on me, like, "Yeah, come and do my window display," or coming to my workshops at Christmas, I was sold out within a day, and all local people who just wanna come and
Wow.
support. I just think there's a real entrepreneurial atmosphere here where probably a bit like America actually, where everyone's just doing their own thing, like, no one has an office job really. My husband does, but he's working from home, and everyone runs their own businesses, and so they're just very supportive. I do pottery classes with a lady, and we basically almost have an exchange of our own talents. So I'll do her an installation in exchange for terms of pottery class, and we're doing
Oh,
collaborations where I'm making dry displays for her pots, and then we're splitting, you know, the money that we get from it. And it's like it just feels lovely to be part of a community. And I think we now know that's what we were missing, but we didn't know it
mhm.
at the time.
Yeah.
Would you say that that shift is more one towards slow living? Do you resonate with slow living? Is that a term that you're familiar with? And if so, like, does it mean anything to you?
I resonate completely with slow living, but I think this world makes it incredibly difficult to practice it. Slow living can be what it is for you. It doesn't have to be a, you know, a specific thing. Is my life less busy now than it was in Farnham? No.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Because my
You
kids
still have 2
are
kids. Yeah.
yeah, I still that's exactly it. You know, there's
Yeah.
they want to go to swimming, they want to go to clubs. We live near the beach now, so we're always down the beach. Do I spend more time outside? Less time in front of my laptop? Do I buy less? Do I eat better food? All of those things are true now that I'm here.
Mhm.
Do I drive my car less? Yes, I'm out on my bike all the time. I swim in the sea pretty much every day.
Mm.
And so even though my day is as full, it is full with nurturing stuff. And that to me is slow living, if you know what I
Mm.
mean. It doesn't have to be that it's a very slow paced life, because I just think that's inherently really hard
Yeah.
in this world. But I guess the way I'm definitely consuming way less, I want less. I don't have that comparison thing at all anymore. I'm just so happy where I am in location wise, but also in my life and in my work. All those kinds of needs and wants that I used to have just sort of gone, which I think makes slow living easier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am, but I'm really cautious of saying, like, as I said, my life is still way too hectic. We're desperate for a holiday. We haven't had one for 3 years, and like, but it's different. I don't feel frazzled and stressed, and you know that kind of thing. So yeah,
I love that you said you want less.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
a really beautiful way to put it.
And you said your life is still very full, but it's full of nurturing things. I think that's a really, really wonderful way to put it because we always say slow living is it has nothing to do with speed or putting your feet up or whatever. It's
mm,
probably misnamed in some ways.
yeah.
Mhm.
But that, what you just said, it's full, but it's a different quality of things that are filling it up.
Yeah, and just because it's quieter here and there's not as many people, we don't spend as much time in the car, and we don't spend as much time battling to get places and do things, which I think
Yeah.
is a lot of it. You know, it's that, you know,
Yes.
Fulham was very busy and it was always a traffic jam or driving next to a road, and just always that constant, like, you know, I think when we moved here, we realized that for a very long time living in a town, we'd been living our lives on high alert because of the kids as well. There's so much traffic, so many people just always looking out for danger. Whereas here, I've got none of that. And it just has really slowed me down inside as well.
Yeah, it's amazing for your nervous system, probably.
Yeah.
So good.
That's so true. I could remember years before I was able to adopt a more slow living lifestyle. And the feeling of not slow living, however you want to put that, had a lot to do with being in a car a lot and
Mm,
trying to get from place to place. And that so much of that is inherent with having kids and having a family and
mm.
trying to keep the meals going and all that kind of thing.
But so when I'd started Botanical Tales, the thing I really struggled with slow living, or just the desire to do things a bit differently,
Hmm.
I just spent so much time being frustrated by the fact that I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit like with meditation and the way that's been marketed as well. I really struggled with that. And then I did a 2-week mindfulness course with Unilever actually when I was in the Netherlands. And what that taught me was you can be mindful in anything that you do if it's that thing that helps you slow your brain down.
Mhm.
So that for me is going out in the garden. It's not that I need to listen to a meditation tape for half an hour. I just
Mhm.
need to go and weed the flower bed and that's
Mhm.
me done.
Yes.
And I think that's the point. If you can find a way to make it work for you, whether that's slowing
Yes.
down your life or slowing down your mind or slowing down whatever, then that's the thing. You've just got to find that thing and not get stressed about it.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. I remember I used to be so stressed out in the mornings getting the kids
Yeah.
up and out the door to school, and that used to just wear me out so much, and it just felt so intense.
Yeah.
And I discovered if I didn't turn on all the lights and if I lit a candle instead, it changed the atmosphere and it sort of slowed
Beautiful.
everybody down. And it,
Yeah.
people would come into the kitchen and instead of being all like on, high stress, trying to get out the door, it just kind of slowed things down. So
That's so
sometimes it's
nice.
amazing what the simplest little thing
Yeah.
can do to shift. But that was a different stage of life for me. That was like 20, 25 years ago. And
Mm.
you learn as you get older. You learn.
Yeah.
I also remember a phase in there was a mom drove us around a lot because there were 3
Yeah.
of us and we were all very into our
And we lived in
activities.
the suburbs and
We
nothing
lived in
was,
the suburbs, there's a
yeah,
lot of time in the car, so do you remember a period of, like, exclusively Enya or choral music on in the car
yeah.
all the time?
Music was a big
Oh,
part of my
yeah.
sanity.
It really helped.
Yeah.
So good. So good.
So
Yeah.
That is
funny.
calming music, though.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I had to do something because I was like,
Yeah.
"I'm gonna crack up here."
Yeah. That's me. I'm like, "I'm going in the garden. I'm going into my greenhouse. I'll see you
Yeah.
in half an hour."
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, well, before we moved here, Ed would be like, "Please, just go to the allotment. Just go for 2 hours and please don't come back until those 2 hours are up."
I know.
X, what does the good dirt mean to you?
It's a tricky question, this one, without going literal. I think for me, when I think about good dirt, it takes me back to childhood and it makes me think of my boys and how we have become so protective of children and the way of living. And I think even more so with the pandemic, with all the hand washing, which I totally understand, by the way. But I think there's nothing wrong with being outside and just whether you're digging in the soil or my kids are playing on the beach and digging in the sand or I'm swimming in the sea and I don't have a shower immediately after I come back. Like just being in natural elements and what was I do? Oh, I went to the woods the other day with the dogs and there was these the whole floor was carpeted in bluebells and moss and the smell that was coming up, you know, that like woodland smell. I
Yes.
don't there must be a name for it, but that for me is like good dirt. Like that I was just walking through the woods and that smell, and it's like my boy came into the greenhouse the other day and was like, "I love the smell of a greenhouse." I mean, what is that
Oh,
smell? But that for me is like, that is good stuff. Like,
yeah. Mhm.
how sad I think life would be for me if I didn't ever have any of those smells or that ability to even recognize them, you know? Yeah, so I think it's just being in tune with your external environment, whatever that is. And obviously for people living in cities, that's a bit harder, but there's still places you can find all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and to add on to that too, I mean, so beautifully said, but there's also taking it a step further, there's been a sense of like, for whatever reason, we've felt like it's better to be removed from that or something, or like the way the
Mm,
world is, or the systems are, or capitalism, or whatever it is. There's something in the world that wants us to forget that and to be removed from that.
Mhm.
yeah.
And so it's like we're kind of finding our way back to that.
Word you were looking for, like what you were smelling in the woods. I guess if you were gonna put you could say it's the humus,
Yeah, I
that
think so.
decaying dirt, and that's, directly related to the word human.
Oh,
Really?
Yes, which reminds us that we are of that.
Interesting. But see, this is because my husband works for WWF, this is what we always talk about is, people always talk about connecting to nature and getting outside in nature, but we are nature. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
we are nature.
yes,
We
I ag
don't need to connect, we need to reconnect back to where we came from, right? It's not
yeah,
a go and touch that leaf and feel what that feels like. It's like, that leaf is us. That's exactly
yeah.
what you
yes.
said. It's like,
Oh,
yeah.
you took the words right out of my mouth, and I've been saying this a lot, how when we say, "Oh, we need to reconnect with nature, we need to connect with nature," that's like
Mm.
setting up the separation. That's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like stating the duality. There's no
Yeah,
duality.
there is no duality,
We
We
are
are
exactly.
it.
one.
We are it.
Yeah.
So instead of the word connect, I think maybe the word to use is
Remember?
acknowledge and
Acknowledge?
remember,
Mm,
recognize, all those
Yeah.
mm.
things, because it's not like we need to do something we aren't doing. We can't not be connected to nature.
Well, I think the problem is when you are disconnected from it, as we've seen, is tenfold because, yeah,
Yeah.
you just lose complete sight of, like, a purpose and what you're doing, really, and, like, yeah, oh, I could talk about that for ages, and obviously my husband doing what he's doing, we do talk about that a lot, like,
Mhm. You're saying
yeah,
WWF, is that World Wildlife
yeah.
Fund? Okay. So that's a lot of, like, conservation work?
Yeah, so he does fundraising, but, at a
Okay.
corporate level. So he works with businesses to try to get them to become better at what they do and the way they do it. But yeah,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, lots of chats about climate change and,
Yeah.
disconnection of nature and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and the microbiology in the soil is
Yeah.
very much related to our own microbiology.
Yeah.
Have you read Wilding? We just finished that in our book club.
Oh yeah,
Yes, I've been there.
yeah.
Mhm.
You've
Oh,
been
you've
Yeah.
been
there.
there.
So it's, I took Ed there for his 40th to go camping for one night because it's just down Knepp, right, in Sussex.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
have glamping. Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, we took our tent and it was for his 40th and it was just us. I left the kids at home and we went and did like a sunrise walk and saw stork nests but it's just absolutely what's so amazing about that, and I think, well, as you've read it, is it's about disconnection where
Mhm.
lots of conservation has been, right, we will save that one species and we will do that one thing to or all these things to
Mhm.
save that one species, but not thinking about the fact that actually they're interconnected with all these other species. And
Mhm.
that's what NEP has done so well, is it's gone, okay, well, if we leave that, what happens? That bird comes in and that butterfly comes in because the butterfly is linked to the bird's ecosystem. And it's like, it's just a
Yeah.
domino effect, isn't it? Of more and
Mhm.
more and more. And it's amazing. And my husband used to be an ecologist and he's of that era where you would just be looking for the one species and taking care of the one species. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting to now see that actually it's really being kind of reassessed, which is great. Yeah, because it can only be a good thing. But it's such a good book and it's such an amazing place.
Yeah.
And then we might have heard the interview we did with the ladies in Scotland,
Lynbreck Croft?
Lynbreck Croft,
Yeah,
and
no,
they
I listen.
so that's an interesting one.
Mm,
These two women ended up with this big property in Scotland and the land was like really had been abused and stuff. So they were really into the rewilding thing. And they even got further into the reassessment of the whole idea because people go so far into the rewilding thing and then they forget that wait, if you're going to do this, then you're going to take the ability to grow any food for this
mm.
plant to eat. And it just gets so nuanced and so complicated and it's so fascinating. And you'd enjoy that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to have a
I'll
chat.
listen to that.
And they have a book called Our Wild Farming Life
Yes,
Oh,
that just came out.
nice.
and they really
Yeah,
have
they're lovely ladies.
created a way of doing it and honoring the wildness of their property while growing food and
Perfect. Yeah.
raising animals, and it's just
Mm.
so fascinating. There's so much to talk about, but, oh gosh, this has really been fun. Yeah, we got way away from dried flowers,
I
but
know.
Yeah, I think it's all linked, isn't it? It's all about
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Bex. This was so fun. So where can people find you?
So they can find me on Instagram at botanical_tales, I think it is. I've got a website, botanicaltales.com. I'm on Patreon as well, which I'm really loving. I started that a couple of months ago and I just share video tutorials, lots of specifics around dried flowers, kind of really going into the detail of how to grow and dry flowers and what to make with them, and then lots about my surroundings as well. And then I have my first book, Everlastings, which came out in 2020. Yeah, pandemic year. And then her big sister is coming out in June and it's called Flowers Forever. And it is a bigger sister of Everlastings. And I guess it's a real kind of reflection of how my work and my values have evolved over the past couple of years. So it's really, really much more focused on the inspiration I get from my surroundings, lots about growing. So there's a big section on what to grow and instructions on kind of how to dry for good results. And then I think there's 13 projects, but they are much bigger than I sort of presented in Everlastings. And it's really about, the beauty of the outside world and bringing it in. And it's a bit of a love story for when we moved here in Devon because I wrote it in this cabin. So yeah, it's about that. It's about inspiration, outdoors, making the most of your space, and celebrating nature, really celebrating us.
Oh, I can't wait.
Wonderful. We always ask one last question. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with about yourself and what you do, or anything else you want to talk about before we say goodbye?
If you have a passion and you're unsure about it, or you don't know what direction to take, it's going to take you in, just keep going. Doesn't matter, even if you don't know where you're going to end up. Just keep practicing, keep going, keep plugging at it, because that's what I did, and I had no idea, and I had so many rejections. But yeah, and even if it doesn't take you to kind of an end result of business or anything like that, I think just to have something that you're interested in and passionate about is really important, particularly maybe as a mother as well, because of how consuming that can be.
Yeah. Oh, that's so helpful. I know that'll resonate with so many people.
Yes, very much. So,
Thank you.
All right, thanks guys, it's lovely to meet you.
thank you.
So
Bye.
lovely.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Good Dirt podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll share it with a friend to spread the good dirt.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at We Are Lady Farmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.